Well, as I said, I have Michael Shank coming on. He's the Associate Director of Legislative Affairs at the Friends Committee. Plus, go to his website. Honestly, now, you hear me say this, but I really mean this strongly. Go to michaelshank.org. Read about this man, his life, his passion, what he is out there researching and doing, not just for just every run-of-the-mill person, but I would have to say globally, trying to make a change. So, Michael, welcome to On the Street.
It's great to be on the show, Wayne. Thanks so much for having me.
Michael, it's my pleasure. I'm sorry it's under these circumstances, but holy smokes, brother, it is not the same country that I remember growing up in. It is becoming almost a paramilitary group of them against the citizens, the police against mom and pop public. Why, as you and I mentioned to you in a conversation before, when the bombings happened here in Massachusetts, I was right on the front line, and I came out of some hedges and had, while I was on the mic with my peers at the station, and I had a guy in military garb stick an automatic weapon in my face and said, if you move, you die. And I'm thinking, well, where am I at? This is not the United States. Let me have your thoughts on it.
What tipped me off originally to this problem, several years ago, I was working for Congressman Mike Honda, and I was looking at pictures in the Oakland Tribune of the Oakland police response to Occupy Wall Street, and they were pulling out these armored personnel carriers that you normally see in the war zone. I said, that can't be right, because the occupied protesters at the time in Oakland weren't being violent, but they were pulling out these armored personnel carriers. And now we're seeing all across the country, in towns as small as Roanoke Rapids, North Carolina, a town of 16,000, they're getting these mine-resistant, ambush-protected vehicles, what you normally see in Afghanistan, what you normally see in Iraq, what we're using over there in the war zone, we're bringing back here in the thousands, giving them away to small-town police forces, even big police forces, tanks, Humvees, grenade launchers, assault weapons, drones, helicopters. And, of course, these police are taking them because they're generally free. Here's the catch, though. All maintenance has to be paid for by taxpayers. So not only are we having to foot the bill, we're having to witness our main streets become much more militarized thanks to these free gifts from the Pentagon from the wars that we're engaged in.
Over $4 billion, and probably I would estimate even more than that. Now, today, the president has come out with a statement that he wants to review doing just that. Now, this whole thing, 1033, and giving the surplus military equipment to the police and various areas of protection here in the United States happened in 1997, but only now is being addressed as maybe we went a little overboard in what we're giving the police. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so Obama's comment is definitely welcome. He's going to probably review two programs, the 1033 program that you mentioned that allows the Pentagon to give war zone equipment to U.S. police force for free, but he's also going to review the Department of Homeland Security's terrorism grants, which has given away $34 billion in cash to U.S. police to let them buy whatever they want. So a U.S. police force, like, for example, Richland County in South Carolina, they acquired a tank with a 360-degree rotating machine gun turret. It's been called the Peacemaker, ironically. That county may have acquired that through DHS, Department of Homeland Security. They got a terrorism grant and bought it, or they maybe got it through the 1033 program. Either way, Obama's going to be looking at both programs because he has heard the public outcry from Ferguson. You saw this in Seattle, too, in the WTO protests. I was there. I was protesting. The crackdown by police then was not quite on par with what we saw in Ferguson, but pretty close, with tear gas and rubber bullets, rubber canisters. And the police chief then, at the time, Norm Stamper, has actually had an about-face, and he's now quite critical of how militarized our police forces are. We brought him to the House for a hearing as part of Congressman Hank Johnson's legislation to change the 1033 program so that we're not dumping tanks, Humvees, assault weapons, drones, helicopters, grenade launchers, and MRAPs into our police forces in America. And so that legislation we're hoping will move forward. It will be introduced in September with probably bipartisan support. We've got bipartisan interest right now. And that's one key measure needed to make sure we demilitarize America's main streets.
Honestly, Mike, again, I think maybe what's happening in Ferguson might be rippling again. The president's statement to have a review, as you talked about. I noticed a protest in New York in regards to the Gardner murder. And I say murder because the coroner stated that the choking of that particular man who was alleged to be selling cigarettes illegally and taking his life in a chokehold that's against the law. I saw the protest today, and I saw police, certainly, because you have large crowds, you have to have some groups of police there to protect, because there are those who commit crimes in given crowds. It is a given. But I didn't see it as I saw it in Ferguson, and certainly I saw the crowd was equally as large, if not larger. Do you think that the reason for that, for the demilitarization in New York today, was in response to what has happened in Ferguson?
I think so. I think with any crowd control agenda, it's about de-escalation. And I think the police in New York recognized that they needed to keep a lower profile and not escalate the situation. Anytime you bring in tanks or Humvees or SWAT gear, and Radley Balco's work on the SWATification of almost every federal agency, including the Department of Education, which has used SWAT teams to go in and do something quite simple as, issue a warrant or some kind of investigation. The SWATification only escalates the situation. So if we're looking at kind of crowd control or de-escalation, a smaller presence is key, and one that's integrated in the community. Something that we've pushed for is community-oriented policing. That's what Norm Stamper, former Seattle police chief, has pushed for as well. But another thing the legislation would do that Congressman Hank Johnson wrote earlier this year, pre-Ferguson, would address all the waste, fraud, and abuse that is rampant among these police forces. One thing that media has done, to its credit, including you, Wayne, and we really want to thank you for addressing this issue, in Ferguson, is show that there is no accountability for how the police are using these weapons, and some egregious examples of police forces, county sheriffs, selling assault weapons or giving them away to friends, selling them on eBay. The millions worth of weapons that have been unaccounted for as part of the 1033 program or even the DHS terrorism grants is absolutely stunning. In terms of weapons just moving quickly. You could just call it trafficking. The kind of gun trafficking, weapons trafficking we see in other countries is happening here because these police forces are getting these weapons and they're moving them to friends or selling them on eBay. So one thing the legislation would do is mandate serious accountability, in-person investigation, inspection, which isn't happening, of stuff that comes from the war zone that we're okay with, like office equipment, because obviously the DoD, Defense Department, is setting up camp in a lot of these countries, brings back a lot of equipment that they're not going to use. We're okay with some of that going to police forces. Let's recycle it. That makes sense. But the heavy weaponry, this legislation would prohibit.
Well, I got an email, Mike, that says this: is there a need for any of this equipment at all? In other words, has the crimes being committed more militant than in times past? Thoughts on that? Is any of this equipment needed? Now, again, Mike, I'm going to just cut you for just a second and allow me to elaborate. When the bombing happened here in Massachusetts, the bombing suspects that they're taken in, it became, and I've seen military zones, it became military. I mean, the National Guard were here with armored trucks and heavy guns, and I had a gun stuck right in my face and said, if you move, you die. And it became... It wasn't the same place. Now, Mike, I'm in my 50s, but I go back to when I was a kid, and all the police knew me. They were part of the community. It wasn't a them or us, and today it does seem that way. It does seem like a them or us. So, again, the question is there any use for any of this equipment? Other than what you said, the stationary.
Yeah, we certainly don't see any use for the equipment that I've mentioned, the tanks, the Humvees, the MRAPs, the armored drones, the militarized helicopters, rather than just surveillance for drones and helicopters, because there can be some more benign uses for some of the stuff. But the assault weapons, the grenade launchers, that's not a country I want to live in, and I think that's a country that no American wants to live in. We're unfortunately creating these war zones elsewhere. Let's not create it at home, at least. My organization, Friends Committee on National Legislation, is against the wars abroad as well, but we're not getting into that topic at the moment. But no, to the email, we don't see any need for this equipment. We actually see a need for much more preventive work. You know, if you really want to reduce crime, if you really want to reduce violence, the correlation between poverty and inequality and some of the real issues plaguing this country in terms of our high income inequality, that's actually how data shows strong correlation. That's how you prevent violence.
Well, you know, Mike, there's a hypocrisy, I feel, because we go and we justify our going into other countries because of their utilization of their police in a military faction, and then in turn, we seem to be doing the thing that we always comment that other countries are doing, and now we're almost becoming the same type of villain that they are. And I hate to say this about my own country because I love my country. I hate to see us walking around shaking a fist instead of shaking hands. Instead, I would have liked to have seen the police in Ferguson and in other areas come out and try to talk and reason and involve the public instead of alienating the public.
That's right. We can't be creating enemies out of our neighbors. We're going to become more suspicious, and the less we interact in a social space, the more likely we are to feel very defensive. And again, that's not a country we want to live in. But in terms of U.S. militarization more broadly and what we're doing in other countries, just take the African continent, the ramp up of U.S. military activities in the last couple of years has increased 200%, over 200%. Last year alone, there was 546 military activities on the continent. That's everything from drone strikes to airstrikes to sending military advisors to invading countries like Libya and Somalia and Mali. So we're ramping up globally, not only here at home. And this kind of thing only benefits, frankly, defense contractors in the defense industry, because what happens is a lot of these MRAPs from the war zone come back. We give 20,000. We have 20,000 ready to give away. We've given a couple thousand away already to U.S. police forces. Next time we go into a big war, then Congress has to commission some more monies for defense industry to make more MRAPs for the next war zone. So it's a cyclical pattern that generally benefits the industry. It doesn't really benefit people here or people overseas.
Now, again, we're talking to Michael Shank. This gentleman is inspiring in his passion, and I don't think he gets any sleep. He is, again, he's the Associate Director for the Legislative Affairs at the Friends Committee on National Legislation. Go to michaelshank.org. I'm telling you, you have a computer, you're listening, there are millions of you out there. Go to this man's website because he doesn't get any sleep. He's always involved in trying to at least figure out our best avenues to finding a better way rather than just blowing the hell out of one another.